Welcome back to Sports World with Patrik. Today we have a special guest who's making waves in the world of club hockey. Joining us is Colin Robin, the assistant coach for the UNLV club hockey program. Colin Colin's a key part of a program that's been gaining a lot of momentum and recognition. With experience and deep understanding of the game, he's helped to shape the team that's ready to compete at the highest level. Prior to his role with UNLV, Colin had an impressive playing journey where he's worked with many teams. Today, we're going to dive into his coaching philosophy, what it takes to build a competitive program at the club level, and his thoughts on the future of the UNLV at UNLV. Colin, it's great to have you on the show. I do sort of want to ask you this question because I do know you transitioned from being a player into the coach. What first drew you to hockey, and then what drew you into coaching after?
Yeah, I think I was born into it. First, appreciate you having me on, but I think I was born into it really. I think I was 6 weeks old when, I'm a much younger brother than my older two, so they were playing their career as I was basically exactly when I was born. So when I was 6 weeks old, my brother was taking me on the ice for his skate with Santa. So, part of it being born into it, part of it probably didn't have much of a choice. It was kind of skates thrown on my feet, but you know, I mean, from as long as I can remember, I've loved it. It's really just, something I was kind of thrown into, I guess, but not exactly disappointed about either.
Colin, obviously, I mentioned you've been with the program now for a while as both as a player, and I know that you sort of were there when COVID happened.
hmm
And with you being there for a while, what first drew you to the UNLV program, and how has it really evolved since you joined?
Yeah, and I think, obviously the relationship I had with both Coach Nick and Coach Anthony, as the recruiting process was going on, they were very, you know, down to earth people who worried more about you as a person than necessarily as a player. So, they were worried about what the right fit might be for me anywhere. Um, as my time with junior hockey ended and I was looking at, what my next step was, I had a couple different options and none of them exactly had the same appeal or luster that Las Vegas did. So I was like, okay, well, you know, what's your worst case scenario? You go out, you try it for a year, and if you don't like it, you can make an adjustment from there. But, I fell in love with it and, here I am 8 years later. I think right from when I came in, the groundwork was laid with the way they wanted to run the program. And, I think it takes a little bit of time for that to seep in, but, the roots are there now where there's a way that this program runs and there's a way that we do things that, may set us apart from other places, but then may compare us a lot more to different programs, like some of the higher end NCAA programs with the way we try and run things. So I think, the biggest thing is just the groundwork and the roots were there when I came in. And, it's easy to buy into a program that, is, sorry for me to say this, but is doing the right things to develop itself. So it's easy to buy into that and, be part of that culture when they're taking the right steps themselves.
And obviously, UNLV, the club hockey, ever since they defeated the NCAA the defending NCAA national champions of Denver, has been really gaining the recognition in the hockey community. With the Vegas Golden Knights there, Vegas has really been a hotbed lately for
Mm-hmm.
hockey. So what do you think sets apart, the program from other teams at the club level?
First of all, I like the support we have. Our fan base is amazing. Vegas is a hockey town. I'm Northern BC born and raised, so I've grown up around the hockey crazed Northern Canada, right? So Vegas is just as much, a hockey city as anywhere else. The people here are crazy. They love it. So I think that's, a huge part of it. We sell out that rink every night and it's very easy to, get up for a Friday night game when you have a full arena behind you. But I think that may be one thing that sets us apart a little bit. But I think really the biggest thing is the support in our, our donor system and everyone we have around us that allow us to, provide things for these kids that other clubs may not be able to, so we try and run everything. And we've had extensive meetings with NCAA teams about this on how we run things and how they run things on the road. And we do everything we can as much to replicate things that they do on the road, such as, we'll never travel the day of a game. We always travel at least the day before. We always try and skate on their rink, you know, at least once before, whether it's just a pregame skate or maybe a practice on a pregame skate type thing. Where we eat, what time we eat, when the kids are going to bed, when the kids have time for study sessions, different things like that. So we try and replicate everything the same way that the NCAA does, in the hopes that when they eventually come knocking, when the door opens, we're fully ready to jump right in. We don't need okay, give us a minute. We're ready to just go all in at that moment.
And so I do also have this question because obviously UNLV, it's a very non-traditional market,
Mm-hmm.
or in a non-traditional market. I think the Vegas Golden Knights really made a successful impact in their first year there. They made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final and everything that they've done. And I've worked with a few programs there, and I've had coaches that I've played with, or not played with, but have worked with, in all honesty. And each assistant coach really has a different perspective on their main responsibilities. So as an assistant coach, what really are your main responsibilities, and how do you sort of collaborate with a head coach? Because I know with it being a club program, there's only really 2 days of practice that you have on the ice, and how do you sort of keep the team moving forward?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned, I think we're very fortunate with the way we run things. We skate at least 3 times a week. They're in the gym at least, I believe, 3 times a week as well. So we, like I mentioned before, we kind of operate a little differently than some club teams where, some club teams, it's kind of just throw on a jersey that's university branded and you go from there, where we're everything we do, we're trying to win hockey games, we're trying to develop players, we're trying to move guys on. And at the end of the day, we're trying to help kids get degrees as well. So I think there's more of a fit on that side for us. But yeah, I think, my biggest responsibility, my biggest thing is, outside of the systematic and the schematic side of things, I think I want to be a voice for the players that isn't Anthony or Nick. I'm a little bit younger. I've been through it a little bit more recently than them. I understand a little bit more of, what they're going through when they have a midterm today, but, they play a top 5 team tomorrow and they're trying to study, but they're trying to be ready for the game and they're doing all these things. They have late night studying because they're worried about their grades and all these different things. So I try and kind of toe that line and understanding a little bit more of what they do on that side, just because, as I mentioned, I've been through it recently as well. So I think that's one of the biggest things for myself. But at the end of the day as well, I care just as much about these guys as anybody else. I want to see guys that I played with, because there is a little bit of overlap there, or guys that have played under me, or things like that. I want to see them be successful, whether it's their career outside of school, whether it's professional hockey, whatever it may be. I want to see them be successful. I want to see them be happy. I think that's kind of the biggest thing about myself, is that ties in a little bit of my philosophy, is what can I do for you today that's going to help you tomorrow, both in the rink, outside of the rink, as a person, anything like that. But also, come 7 o'clock when it's puck drop as well, hey, I'm going to help you understand a little bit more of the game because I have a different view of it than he does. And I can go back and check things on YouTube and different things with our live stream and stuff like that, where I can go back and rewatch a play and hey, give a little bit of a different insight in that way.
And then obviously, I do have this other question, because you talked about how recently you've been a player, and what you how you sort of philosophize, how you sort of have your coaching philosophy as a coach, and as a player. I do really have this question. I've talked to in the past week and a half or so with quite a few club coaches. Obviously there's the big challenges that most of them face. I even had I don't know if you guys have scheduled them yet, but the University of Georgia's head coach, a club hockey head coach, John Camp, he talked about the challenges that he saw when he first joined uh the program there. And that's really the SEC football country area. So at a school like UNLV, what have you, where hockey really isn't a main sport? Obviously you mentioned that you guys sell out games every day, but what, besides that, like during the football season, or even like if there's a big basketball tournament being hosted in Las Vegas, have you guys, what are sort of the challenges you face there?
Sure. I think, realistically, I think the biggest challenge we face is our location at the moment. Honestly, we're very blessed with the facility that, we're in, and we've have the Golden Knights to thank for that because they, went out of their way to help us out with that when they came into town. For us getting to the rink, I believe it's probably about a 20-25 minute drive from campus. So with UNLV, having the on-campus presence it does, and arguably it's more of a commuter school than it is anything else because there isn't a whole lot of life on campus. It's still tough for people to go and find, a ride 25 minutes to go out and go to a game or drive themselves or different things like that. So I think that's really one of our biggest things. And we've tried working with ways around that as well, but it just never really worked out in the past with finding, somebody to sponsor say a bus to and from games or different things like that. It's just never necessarily worked out the way we would like it to. But yeah, I think honestly our biggest thing, we obviously lose fans to the football game or basketball games at different times and things like that. But, I think for the longest time up until the last couple of years, we were, and obviously no disrespect to UNLV Athletics, but we were kind of the team on campus that was winning a lot. So we were getting a lot of fans because they could go out and they could watch us play, a top level team, and the results are probably going to be favorable for us. Where for a while there, UNLV football was in a bit of a skid, and UNLV basketball wasn't doing all that great either. Where they weren't winning games at times. So it's more fun as a fan to go to a game that your team's going to win as opposed to something that you feel like they're on the other end. I don't necessarily think there's a whole lot of issue with that. We have fans from the college, we have fans from just hockey crazed Vegas fans. So I think there's a fine mix. There may be a day or so where you can notice a little bit that it's a little thinner today because there's a football game on or a Golden Knights game on or something like that. I think our biggest competition is our location.
And then obviously you were mentioning, some of your coaching philosophies on how you want to help players who are in your program right now, because you used to be in the same situation, quite a
Mm-hmm.
few years ago. So when it comes, and obviously you've seen different coaching philosophies through your career, you've sort of seen the Canadian system, that how their coaches have their philosophies, and you see the North American version of it. So when it comes to player development, what's your coaching philosophy, and how do you sort of help players grow both on and off the ice?
Yeah, honestly, I think you kind of see it a lot, like even throughout NHL or different pro leagues or anything like that, where teams have different philosophies and the coaches come up with different philosophies, and it's getting to be less of like a the old kind of drill sergeant who stands on the board and screams at you and tells you where to go and different things like that. I think there's a lot more now where you need to relate to a player, and I think that's the one thing you see with NHL with younger coaches coming in, or the handful of NHL players who have jumped right into assistant coaching roles. One off right off the top of my head with Steve Ott, but just guys that can relate and understand it, because like I mentioned before, like things are tough for these guys at all times. You don't know if they have a final today, if they if they're having car issues and they don't necessarily have the money to afford car issues. Like everything that you can look at and see that may affect a college student's life, now tack hockey on top of that and high level hockey at that. And, now you're dealing with that for one of our players. So I think that I kind of mentioned, like my biggest philosophy is I try and relate to the guy as much as I can. We may have completely different lives, but coming in, but for this patch of 4 years, I fully understand everything you're going through because I went through it. So just the biggest thing is just understand the kid, have a relationship with the kid, and you'll be more open with them. They'll be more open with you, and you really get to the bottom of what's going on. And when you understand, and the guy can play free without without anything going on in his mind because he knows there's support, he's going to play better. He's going to play more loose, So
And obviously, hockey's such a fast-paced game, probably the fastest game that I can think of right now in the world. But so much happens in such a short time. So how do you sort of balance the strategy with giving players the freedom to make their own decisions on the ice, given that
yeah,
club programs are soon?
yeah, I think that it's kind of catch-22. Like you want players to play free and you want them to be confident in their game and feel confident with the puck on their stick. But by the same token, too, if they're making, for lack of a better word, dumb plays, you got to kind of send back and be like, hey, that's not what we're trying to do right now. That's not who we are. That may not even be the game that you play, you kind of like balance it and take a step back where it's like, hey, like I see what you're trying to do. I get it. Like I get what you see, but at the same time, it's like we need to be. We always frame it in a way that's never necessarily about a person, but rather about the team. So if he makes a bad play and turns a puck over, something like that, it's like, hey, we're a puck possession team. We want the puck. Like, make this simple play. Keep the puck on our stick. Use your teammates. Don't do it all yourself type thing. Where instead of the old school coach's way, where scream your head off and then you sit down for 20 minutes, you don't touch the ice again, right? So I think it's a different style in that. Like I said, there's a fine line to toe, but I think Anthony and Nick have a great job, or have done a great job of navigating that and fully understanding it. And I think I'm learning a lot of that from them. Trial and error, I guess.
Yeah. And obviously, you played there for a while there, and I know
Mm.
for you it had to be physically and mentally, the demands of hockey, the demands of hockey are really physically and mentally significant. And obviously you were talking just a while ago about, having these players where they have they have to make sure they're doing well. They study for a final, a midterm, as they're getting close to having the their degrees. And it's hard in life, definitely, when you're like stressing about, okay, for example, like when you guys went to you guys played against Denver, a lot of the guys were probably still focused on what happened during their final and their upcoming semester. How do you sort of help those players maintain a good balance between academics and athletics and their personal life, given how you went through it before they have, and
Mm.
you're a very big mentor for them.
I think the biggest thing is just we preach, and obviously it's easier to preach than it is to actually do, but we really preach that when you come to the rink, be prepared to forget everything but hockey for a 3, maybe 4 hour window, and just forget about everything except hockey for that period. But then when it comes to being on the road or anything like that, you just allot time for these guys to take care of the things they need and have downtime built into the schedule, where if somebody has an assignment coming up, they have time to sit down and do it and things like that. But quite honestly, I got to give the players credit. They're so on top of it. Like better than I ever was. I don't know if I've ever. We had, I think, our best team GPA ever this year. I believe we're in the high 3.5, north of that, something like that. We had an unbelievable team GPA, but I don't think I've seen one of them do homework on the road, downstairs in the hotel lobby or anything like that. So I think really it just speaks to their commitment and the leadership that they have of guys being like, hey, get your stuff done, because, we treat every road trip or every game weekend like a business trip, right? So take care of your stuff, get all this done because you have a business trip coming up. So, as much as it is, I can speak to it and a little bit of what I've gone through in the past. It's these guys that are taking care of their academics themselves, and they're worried about their own degree, and they get it done. And you know, on the weekend they play hockey, and then during the week they're school focused outside of like a 3-4 hour window, like I mentioned. But it's mostly them, their own commitment to it.
And obviously, so I used to work for an NCAA Division One program, and it was at the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how much a team culture can be a success, can sort of lead to a successful team. And obviously, a coach has a big part of that, between the communications of the leadership and the coaches. What would you sort of say that the team culture at UNLV is like, and you know, how do you sort of foster teamwork within the squad?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that it is it really comes down to, kind of like I mentioned, like how things are when you come in. It's easy to buy into a bigger picture when you know what it is right from the start, as opposed to, you look at it with NHL players going through a rebuild, right? superstar who's been on the program for so long. He signed somewhere to compete, and now all of a sudden this team has decided to go into a full rebuild. He's like, "Oh, I didn't sign up for this." So we really try and set the groundwork and the culture so that the first day as freshmen they walk in, they understand what they're getting into for the next 4 years. And if they're in, they're in. If you're out, you're out. So as soon as they walk in, we have everything laid out for them. We have our culture, we have our identity. They learn it from the start. They're expected to know it at any time. We never will, but if we have the standard that I can look at you on the corner on a Friday night and say, "Hey, what's our identity?" You're expected to know it. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is that they buy in from freshmen, and then by the time comes that they're sophomores, it's better ingrained in their heart, and juniors and seniors, and by the time they're senior, it's live and die by it. So really it's that, and then on the leadership a lot too, of we have a culture that we want, the culture we want. If we're straying from that, you're gonna it. So before you come to us and, "Hey, this isn't a good group, this isn't a good culture," it's on you and your leadership and your upper class to change it, because you don't want your senior year to be the year that, per se, the whole culture goes down the drain, or a team just isn't bought in and you don't have a great year because of it. So it is, partly on setting the tone, the expectations, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of the guys and the way that they handle themselves and carry themselves, and the way that they want this culture to be built.
And obviously, you were just talking about the culture and how much that plays an important role, starting freshman year, to sort of tell players, "Hey, this is what our culture is going to be," and make sure that they know everybody from there on out when they join in the freshman year. They're still going to learn their culture, and obviously, you know, I know the experience of beating Denver was really good, and I know that had to be a really tough game to play in. Just because they might have been a little bit more physical than the teams that UNLV is normally used to playing, or even maybe they were just the crowd noise was really loud or something. But how do you sort of motivate the players when everything's sort of getting tough, or you're on a losing streak, or you're having challenges completing a practice session just correctly. You're there and you're like, "You know what, I don't think I can do this challenge because it's so hard to you know I can't get over this." And how do you sort of motivate them there?
The one thing I will say, before I touch a little bit more on that, is didn't really have to be a whole lot of motivation, going in for Denver. There's so much talent in this hockey world that for, a lot of these guys that we have on our roster, for one reason or another, were deemed by somebody at some point that they weren't NCAA caliber. They have teammates that are NCAA caliber. They have best friends. They have all these different things that were deemed NCAA caliber and are now NCAA players, but for some reason they were labeled as not. So we have a very talented group of guys who come in with a chip on their shoulder to show that there's a lot more talent in hockey than people realize. We've kind of debated as a staff a little bit on what it would be like, but there's however many Division I football teams, right? And teams play each other all the time. If you were to apply that same way to hockey, Division III would be Division I. A good half, maybe more, of ACHA would be Division I. The field of talent is just so wide, but there's only so many opportunities. I think for our guys coming in, they wanted to be the guys that knocked off Denver. They wanted to be the guys that made a little bit of history for ACHA and for club hockey. So there wasn't really a ton of motivation that we had to have. A lot more of our focus as staff was schematics and system and how we're going to run things. So, but when it came to puck drop, guys were ready because they wanted to be ready. That was on them. But yeah, things get grueling come, this time, January, February-ish, where you're looking at every weekend you have games and you're kind of just fighting your way through the schedule, kind of in the dog days, you could say, but I think the biggest thing really when you look at that is we do what we can to get quantity over quality. So if we see reps start dying off in a certain drill, stop it, move on, get into something new, keep them fresh. And I think that normally goes for keeping them engaged, but also keeping them healthy as well. So yeah, I think that's really like the biggest thing that we look at is if we have to take practice time down and go from what is usually an hour to say 50, maybe 45 minutes or even less than that, we will, because we look at quantity over quality. But outside of that, a lot of it's on leadership too. If guys aren't ready and just aren't feeling it on a certain day, leadership will let you know. Leadership will come down on you, and you'll hear it from them. You won't necessarily hear it from us, but you'll hear it from our upperclassmen who are, on their last ride. They
Yeah.
need everyone bought it.
And so I can't remember if I touched on this topic, but I do have this very important question because every coach that I've talked to in the last, I want to say, month or so has always talked about how important, your leadership group talking and the messages they send to their teammates and how they handle the rough situations. You know, if let's say the coaching staff is like, "Hey, we don't want to talk about this," but the leadership group is like, "Hey, look, we have to talk about this." That's a really hard situation to be in, but how does that help sort of make teams very successful when you have a good communication between your coaches and your players and the leadership group in general?
It's huge, right? Like you can get overwhelmed as coaches with everything that goes on in a room, right? With if so and so doesn't agree with so and so today, and they have they're button heads a little bit or whatever it may be, like all these different things. If a team came to you with every problem every day, like straight to the coaching staff instead of anybody else in the room that can help, your job wouldn't be coaching, you'd be essentially a therapist at that point, right? Which a good part of coaching is being a therapist, but at the same time, we have the system set up with our upperclassmen where and upperclassmen leadership, anybody a year older than you, where if freshmen, if they have an issue, they know they can go to the sophomores, the juniors, the seniors, they can go to anybody in that room for help, whether that be academically or just not feeling right, or they're just having something's going on at home and they're not feeling great. They can go there first and they can handle it there before it even gets to us. But with everything said as well, we have weekly meetings with our leadership group and with all our captains to really get the pulse on the team and to really understand what's going on in the room. And then from our side, how we feel, what we need reiterated to the room, and what we need to, really key in on this week. I think that's really like the biggest thing is, you know, like I mentioned, like these guys all have different things going on, everything in their life. Every kid's going to be different. Every kid has something different going on at a different time, everything. But they need to know that they have support one way or another, whether it's through leadership group, whether it's through us, whether it's through a random outside third party. You just need kids to feel supported and to feel like they have somewhere to go, I guess you could say. Sorry, I don't really know if I hit your question on the head or not there, but
You're all good. But I also do have this question. Obviously, with club hockey, it's sort of a student because of its being student ran. You have to pay your dues, and
mhm.
sometimes that's what keeps players out of playing hockey. Obviously, is the high cost of hockey. If you can just sort of touch on that, and then also like, you've been through it where you've had to go, and you're like, okay, my like these coaches are judging me and they're gonna say, "Hey, yeah, you're good to come on the team," or "Oh, wait, you're not good enough to come on the team." And obviously, now as a coach, you sort of do that for players who are joining the team. What are some of the standout qualities that you sort of look for when you're recruiting players to come and play, and particularly during the tryout period?
Yeah, touch like you mentioned with the cost of things, like that's the unfortunate position that we are in, and the gap that we're looking to close. Right, we want to be able to bring players in because we think they'll fit our program, not necessarily because they can afford to be part of our program or anything like that. So we do everything we can to help a kid out in any way possible. We have, we'll never, what's the best way to say it, I guess, is we'll never look away at a kid because of his financial situation. If he's a strong hockey player, we will exhaust different options. We'll see everything we can to possibly bring him in or anything like that. When it comes to recruiting, I think, being Las Vegas, we have to look at the person first. And it has to be a good kid, good character. He wants to be here for the right reasons, everything like that. Because, as I'm sure anybody who's ever vacationed in Las Vegas can attest to, things can turn quickly and Vegas can hurt you quick. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of what we look at is the person first, hockey player second, but not just because of Vegas, but because of ties back into our culture. Like, who is this kid in the locker room? So if we're looking at a kid, for example, we'll talk to probably every one of his coaches he's ever had. Elite prospects. You can go through. You can find their coaching staff. You can talk to anybody. We are very fortunate where coaches are really honest about the kid as well. And the same way I would be with anybody as well. A lot of what we look at is the character of a kid and then where where he's from, what his family dynamic is like. We look at everything about the person before we do the hockey player. And once he hits all those benchmarks, then it's like, okay, we need a forward next year. He's a forward. Good player. He's fast. He's all these different things. He fits. He would help our lineup. He would help us win games. Okay, good. So I think, like I mentioned, like the biggest thing is look at it as what kind of person is he? And that's, the biggest thing. Is he the kind of guy in the locker room who's going to bring everybody down and is going to hurt the locker room? Is he the kind of guy that's going to come to Vegas and get overwhelmed by the lights and the ability to do anything at any time, right? Like, a realistic thing behind it is, a lot of the kids we bring in are just turning, if not 21, in Vegas, right? Like, that's dangerous, So
Yeah.
there's a good handful of kids that you look at that we haven't taken in the past because that would have been an issue, and there's kids that we've taken because we know that can't be an issue at all. So
And obviously, UNLV's campus is really, really close to the strip right there. I know.
yeah,
I have a few coworkers who are always like, "Yeah, UNLV's on the north side. It's not near the strip." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And then they'll look at it and like, "Oh yeah, there. It's right by the strip area."
no, I know people who have walked from campus to the strip. It's not fun to do, and it's not a great area, but it's definitely not far.
Yeah, and then obviously looking ahead in hockey, you were just talking about how college football, how many teams there are there, and obviously I'm not sure if you have heard, which I don't know a lot, but about different situations and how much news of NCAA hockey makes it out anywhere in the world. But obviously, American International, they are
Mhm.
taking their NCAA Division One program down to a Division Two program, and I know there's a big push right now to sort of grow NCAA Division One. I believe Illinois was supposed to have one, and the cost there was just too high for them to have one. There's all these talks of different schools possibly downgrading their NCAA Division One programs with this new revenue sharing that's going to happen with the NCAA collegiate teams. You know, where do you sort of see UNLV club hockey being in the next 3 to 5 years? What's sort of your vision for the team growth there?
Yeah, I mean, we like I said, we want to make that jump, right? Doing everything we can to be ready and to be, one of the next teams that gets that call. Whether that happens or not, and everything like that, that's kind of outside of our hands. There's a lot more that goes on to it than just, be a winning team and all that stuff, right? So we're doing everything we can on our side to be ready for the call, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work as well that I'm not exactly most versed in. That is, a major part of it as well. But from us, like I mentioned, like we are doing everything we can to handle everything the right way. We're trying to run our program like an NCAA program right now. We're trying to, provide kids the same stuff that NCAA programs do. We're trying to compete with these NCAA programs. We want to, I think the biggest thing with Denver that people are glossing over is, now we can look at different people that are behind the scenes and everyone, before saying, you guys aren't ready, you guys don't have the team, da da da. And we can look at it and say, hey, we have none of the resources they do. We try and replicate everything they do as much as we can, but we don't have the ability to pull talent. We don't have, any of the stuff that they do, but we're able to go up there and we're able to compete with this team right now. So it kind of gives them a little bit of a message of, if we can do this right now, how's that going to look for us in the future? When we do have this ability and when we do have the chance to, have the same pull as these guys. So for us, it's everything stays the same, but at the same time, we're ready at any moment that happens and that the phone rings. We're ready to jump right in. Yeah, just we're ready.
And then obviously you mentioned you're from Canada, and you've played hockey in Canada. You sort of grew up around hockey in general.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you've gotten to see all the fun stuff. And with, I know Arizona, the Coyotes are gone. They're gone. They're now in Utah. And obviously, I had one coach tell me that if we didn't have a team in Arizona, we wouldn't have seen Austin Matthews, a very very talented player there. And Arizona State, they have an NCAA Division I program right now. Outside the X and O's, is like, what do you think really makes hockey such a special sport? And why should more people get involved in the sport, whether it's at the club or even the collegiate level?
I think obviously there are outliers to this and different things like that, but I think the one major draw with everything is you have a very hard time finding a hockey player that you can't sit down and have a conversation with. Like they never seem to be, too big for their britches or anything like that and everything like that. But outside of all of that, I think just the atmosphere, for anybody that is torn on hockey and if they like it or not, I recommend you go to a hockey game. Sit down for 2.5, 3 hours, give it its time of day, and just watch. I remember, he's became quite a personality on X or Twitter, I guess, whichever one you want to address it by. He's became quite the personality on there, but there was a fan who was watching, I believe it was one of the St. Louis Blues playoff games when they made their run, and he was just kind of live tweeting as it went on, and all these different things, and now he's the biggest hockey fan in the world, and he's got a huge social media presence, everything like that, where I really recommend anybody just sit down, watch it. If it doesn't grab you, it doesn't grab you, but sit down, give it its time of day, watch. Something's going to happen that makes it interesting. You're going to see a highlight reel goal. You're going to see a big hit. You're going to see a fight. You're going to see something that's going to get your attention. I think that's, the biggest thing we look for as well is anybody's like, oh, UNLV hockey. Oh, that's cool. Like, and if they aren't necessarily interested, hey, come out for one night, like take one Friday, one Saturday night, whatever it may be, come out, sit in the stands and see what it's like, and I think that applies anywhere, for anybody. If you want to understand hockey, go to a game. It's really the best way to say it.
Yeah. And obviously, you've played, and you've also sort of, in the years since you've left your playing career behind, I know you've worked with players at all different skill levels. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you sort of manage players who are newer to the game compared to those with some experience, whether it's junior hockey or, they were playing the Pee Wee leagues and they just now got right back into hockey because they find out UNLV has a club hockey program?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just fun. Like what I really look back and then like what kept me going with everything was that I enjoyed it. I never, I was fortunate enough to go to an academy program when I was younger and everything like that. I never viewed it as, I don't know, anything other than fun to be honest with it. And I think, you have to keep the fun going as you grow. Like you look at all these NHL players, and when the game isn't fun anymore, that's when it gets really hard to play. And when anything loses its luster, its appeal, it gets tough. So I think, like I mentioned, just like keep things fun for them in some way. Like, yeah, things are different with us at our level where it's more of a business at times. But at the same token as well, like I mentioned, like it needs to be fun. It needs to be something that the kids enjoy coming to the rink every day, whether it's 21 plus years old that I'm working with every day, or whether it's younger kids, 8 and unders, 10 and unders, anything like that. Like it needs to be fun, and it needs to be something that they enjoy doing. Because if they don't enjoy it, they're not going to do it, right? If you enjoy it, you're going to put the work in. You're going to take care of things outside of the sport that need to get done first, so you can do it. It's just really the biggest thing is it needs to be fun.
Yeah. And obviously, if you could, or I have this question also, if you could give one piece of advice to young hockey players hoping to play at the collegiate level, whether it's NCAA or club, what would it be?
Outside of the cliche, take care of your grades stuff, I think really the biggest thing is, don't be one dimensional, like work on everything. Don't just be a guy who's really fast forwards, be a guy who's really fast forwards, backwards, and laterally. Don't just be a guy who is really good at hitting left corner, like pick your spots, hit everything, like everything like that. I think that's the biggest thing is work on every aspect of your game, because there's the all cliche elastic example is you work on one part of your game, the rest of your game is going to come up as well. So I think the biggest thing is, you know, work on everything. Don't just work on what's fun. Work on the stuff that isn't fun, because at the end of the day, what's going to make you, more dimensional and more dangerous is work on everything.
And obviously, Colin, I'm going to ask you a few fun questions here. Uh, Obviously, hockey is known for its intense locker room culture. Can you share, a fun or memorable key moment that you really stood out to you both as a player and as a coach?
Unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of fun ones that are like, I don't know, like not exactly fun stories. Is more kind of different. I don't know. I think honestly, the biggest and most fun I had in the room was just anything you do. Like it's a random, and this is a lot of what I miss about hockey as well, is you walk in a room on any random day and it's always the same. The guys are always light and they're always chirping at each other, they're always barking at each other, but it's never out of, any spite or anything like that. Like it's all out of love, and you just hear guys going back and forth and everything like that. Yeah, I think, yeah, probably not many that I can actually share, but I think that's kind of the biggest thing of just keeping it fun and light is, any random day, no necessary example, but just anything that goes on.
And then I also do have this question. So I know coaching is not the easiest position to be in, since if a team is doing really really bad, you're gonna have the parents like, well, this coach isn't coaching the players right, or this coach made a bad decision, or this and that. And I know officiating also gets its fair share of complaints, but obviously, it's hard being a coach in hockey, particularly
Mm-hmm.
because of how tight the sport is when it comes to playing. And you mentioned some of the ACHA teams could be NCAA Division One teams, at one point, and you know a lot of fans don't get to see the behind the scenes stuff. Like, when I worked with an NCAA Division One program, and I've gotten to see some of these other programs, and I hear fans like, "Oh, this coach doesn't know what they're doing," or "This player doesn't know what they're doing," or somebody needs to do this and that. It's not easy to just sit there in the stands and listen to it. Um, which most of the time, that's all I do. I've been sort of just used to everybody being like, "Well, this coach needs to do this coach needs to do that, whatever." But what's really something most people don't might not know about coaching at the club level, or even like what's sort of part of your job that fans don't really get to see.
I think the biggest thing we notice as a staff is a lot of people don't necessarily understand the time that actually goes into it. They think it's just show up to the rink with enough time to change your tracksuit and put your skates on and go out there and lead a practice. But like, you're a lot of people don't realize you have a lot of things during the week that you're trying to hit and that are going to prepare you for the weekend and everything like that. So I think a lot of people don't realize really the time that all these club coaches are putting in, coaches in general, but, at the club level, especially where, these top programs like ourselves are treating it like NCAA programs and they're preparing everything like NCAA programs. And it takes a lot to do. We started our prep for Utah this coming weekend I started it yesterday. So, we're 6 days out from playing them and we're already preparing for them, so it doesn't necessarily stop. It's continuous grind and a lot of time that goes into it. But at the end of the day too, if my job is watching hockey, it's not a bad job.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I do have two questions before I do let you leave. What's one thing you want fans and really the listeners of the podcast to know about the UNLV hockey program that they might not be aware of?
I think really the biggest thing is, kind of like I mentioned, come out to a game, come check us out. We're doing everything we can to run, the program in the right way to build something that both the university and Vegas is proud to stand behind. We're in the community just as much as anything else. Sit down, chat with any of us, coaches, players. We're all, open to conversation, anything, but just come on out and check us out. A lot of people can look at it from the outside and say different things about the program and different things about, club hockey in Vegas and everything like that. But, if that's your opinion and that's the way you see it, come check us out. We'll change your mind pretty quickly about that.
And then finally, my very last question, for people who sort of want to follow the team's journey and support the program moving forward, what's one thing that they can do for the team?
Honestly, support us on our socials. Our social media team does an amazing job with everything they do. They'll keep you updated on everything us. They're funny videos every now and then, but most importantly, they'll have you updated on all our games, how everything looks for us, and any news around the program. Yeah, if people are so inclined, check us out on social media.
Colin, this has been really an incredible conversation. It's clear that what you're doing is amazing work with the UNLV club hockey, and it's exciting to see where the program is headed. And I'm sorry, I do have one more question before I do let you go. What's one piece of advice you would give aspiring players and coaches out there who are looking to make an impact in the hockey world, especially at the club?
I think kind of the biggest thing is, and it was definitely this way when I came in and kind of got laughed at a little bit, but you look at it now after, going viral and being in an NCAA program. But if you want to take something seriously, take it seriously. Everything in your life, and whether this is sports or hockey or applies to anything, if you have the passion for it and you want to take it seriously and you want to get something somewhere, go for it. There was a time when this program had, there was no way that we were going to schedule a top 5 team in the ACHA, let alone a defending national champion. There was moments of this program with all that stuff, but the people around it took it serious, put the work in, did everything they could to grow it, and put their heart into it, and look at where it's gotten to now, and the notoriety that the program has. So I think really my biggest thing that applies, coaching, playing, anything is if you care about it and you want to do it, go full bore into it, put your heart into it, and your worst case, if you fail, that you gave something your all that you truly care about. So that's kind of my biggest thing with that is just, care for it, I guess.
Thanks again, Colin. Thanks for
Of
joining
course.
us today. It's been a pleasure to hear about your experience, the team, and your vision for the future of UNLV club hockey. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for the program's success.
Please.
And for all our listeners, don't forget to check out the UNLV club hockey program and show your support. Colin, best of luck with the rest of the season and everything ahead. And for our listeners, as always, thank you for tuning into Sports World with Patrik. We'll be back with more stories from the world of sports. Stay tuned and take care.